What's going on, people of the world? We are live. It's the Reap the Harvest podcast / show / game changing movement. What's going on, Matt Tack?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Can't complain at all. Can't complain at all. Staying busy, getting lots of content out into the world, helping people, see things from the right perspective and move in the right direction, man. I think it's cool what we're doing. Today, you wanted to talk about teaching what we know and reproducing what we are and who we are. And if we're moving in the right direction, then we're going to be having the right people around us, the right information around us. And so I think it's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man. Feliz Viernes. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Super excited to put out some content today and talk a little bit more about teach what we know, reproduce who we are. I think it's just so important. I was listening to a John Maxwell podcast, so he's one of my mentors. I just really dive into his teaching, and I think it's I think it's just important overall to just put a lot of positive reinforcement in your mind. I told my guys this week that at the end of the day, you have to establish something bigger than yourself. I was in a call even this morning with one of my really good friends about establishing something that's even bigger than yourself, something that ultimately it's hard to even visualize, but like you gotta put it into words. You gotta make something that is not about, and I always say this in every one of it, that isn't about the temporary things. I say this actually quite a bit, but put your happiness in temporary things. Your happiness will be temporary. And one of the things that I've just been, seeing in my life as far as like diving into mentors is really just like an evolvement of my mindset overall. And some of the things that even this week, I think it might have been even a little bit of a refresher. But John Maxwell was talking about, we teach what we know and we reproduce who we are. And one of the other things that he said was, there's different times in life where you're ready to be a student. So I was just thinking back and reflecting of when I'm like, man, could I have been taught the same things today when I was like 18, 19, 20 years old? And I'm looking at some of these kids that I would say that are like almost my colleagues and same type of real estate industry I'm in. I was talking to a guy, an investor the other day in Rhode Island, really cool guy. I've just been having really transparent, really, really good conversations with people as I go through this capital raise. And the one thing that came out was, man, there's kids like 23, 24 years old with the same vision, the same mentality that I have, right? And I'm 34, right? I'm 10 years older than them. And they just have this really good mindset of like where they're going, and they have their purpose and their why already established. This kid in Texas, 24 years old, originally from Michigan in my hometown, and just doing some big things. And I go back and to something that actually Tim Brott said. I don't know if he grabbed it from somebody else, but you thinking dollars make dollars, right? Thinking thousands make thousands. Thinking millions make millions. Thinking hundreds of millions make hundreds of millions. You think Jeff Bezos, he just collected, I think as of January, he collected about 24 billion to his portfolio. Do you think that when he was in his garage, he was thinking, I'm just gonna fight another day to make another dollar? No, that dude had a way bigger vision that was outside of himself. That was like, I'm not gonna teach people just what I know. I'm gonna reproduce people that are me, right? And he's reproduced people a lot and created a massive fan base and a crazy culture that's really cool. That he's reproducing, right? And he's made an impact on the world that, quite honestly, is just, you can't think in terms of just your garage and just your surroundings, right? I'm in my office space right now, which technically, it's I guess it could be a converted garage. We call it a mother-in-law suite down here, but I love it because it's close to my house. My babies can come out and see me. Everything that I do is pretty much virtual, and then I have to fly around and meet people. But I just think it's amazing. And quite honestly, this is my, what I consider my homestead, my reflecting room, where I plan on, creating something that's much bigger than myself. I don't have a really big team. I have about 8 people that I call my team members. And my main focus is establishing their why very early on. And every time I meet somebody, they're kind of like, what? Like, what are you asking me? Like, no, dude, I can't remember what I ate yesterday or even what I wore yesterday. I'm not thinking what I'm where I'm going to be at in 5 years. But one of my first questions that I ask my team members is look, where do you want to be in 5 years? And it forces them to think of a bigger purpose, a bigger why that they have to figure out, right? You have to think of something a little bit bigger than yourself. You have to think of something outside. Oh, where do I want to be in 10 years? Or where do I want to be in 5 years? Yeah, I want to have $1 million in the bank. Well, how are you going to get $1 million in the bank and for what purpose, right? How is that going to make you happy? What pursuit of happiness? Because we all are really we're pursuing, we're really not pursuing money, right? Because money doesn't create happiness. It's all about, the pursuit of love, peace, and joy. And that pursuit of love, peace, and joy, what does that bring you? And it's different across the board, why you establish. And it's so important to establish your why very early on, because my pursuit of love, peace, and joy is much different than Pat's. It's much different. And it could be, right? Your pursuit of love, purpose, love, peace, and joy could be where I need to have $10 million in the bank to be happy. And if that truly makes you happy, man, by all means, go put $10 million in your bank account. I don't think it's going to last very long, but that's it. Go ahead, Pat, man. You got something to say?
Well, what I was going to say is that I think that, like you said, success, happiness, all that stuff is different for each person. And reproducing what we are is kind of an interesting concept. I didn't really think about that until I typed it into the box for the show. But, that's kind of where I started to see a lot of change in my life, and a lot of happiness in my life was using my technical skills and my ability to just put myself in front of an audience that I've been doing since a young age to help other people do it. And now people like Matt are out there helping people have a positive impact on people and have a positive day by putting out a positive message. And I mean, when we first started talking about even doing this, planting the seeds of positivity on the internet to, reap the harvest of you accelerating as a personal development leader and as a content creator online. I mean, it was kind of an iffy conversation, but I saw in you the ability to reproduce what I put out into the world, which is positivity, in a different way, in the Matt Tack way. And that's what we're doing today. And I think it's amazing that we have these tools and we have this opportunity. And I think when you were talking about the younger generations, they have access to tools that we didn't have access to 10 years ago. When I was in digital audio production school, 10, 15, over 15 years ago, almost 20 years ago, these tools were so expensive. A lot of people didn't have access to it. You had to be NBC or Universal or ESPN to be broadcasting worldwide at 11:30 in the morning. Now we can hop on these tools that are accessible for us and do that. And we can teach what we know, and we can reproduce what we are, and we can help other people make a difference in the world. And I think that if you focus on finding that information online, that's what you're going to be downloading into your head. But if you focus on all the other negative stuff that's online that's easily accessible too, well, then that's what you're going to be downloading into your head. That's what you're going to be talking about. And guess what your results are going to be? Not so hot. Yeah. And so we're trying to advocate for people to get the right information, get around the right people, and surround yourself with people that are seeking knowledge that's going to help them level up.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, man. Couldn't agree more. We had one of our meetings this morning too, and I just want to let you know, because man, I love feedback. I love being vulnerable as a leader. I love to tell guys what I need to work on the most. And I think that's just such imperative, the part of reproducing what you are is part of that vulnerability. I said in a past episode, vulnerability is going to be your biggest strength. And it's allow you redefine your definition of failure when you do that. Kudos to Sarah Blakely on that one. Love that one. Love listening to her, man. She's an amazing woman.
Yeah, she's good.
and have gotten a couple people onto her podcast and with Tony Robbins. That was just phenomenal hearing her. But that redefinition of redefining your definition of failure. And the one thing that I was just vulnerable to my guys this morning is like, dudes, like when I get into meetings and I'm being super intentional about this, but it's active listening. Like active listening is so key. It's so key across the board. And it's something that actually I saw like almost as a kind of a hard spot in my marriage too, as far as like just getting in and digging into my wife as far as actively listening. Cause I'm always trying to like, I have a good side and a bad side, but like when I try to multitask, I'm like diving into the message or I'm on that phone call. And we were on a family walk the other day and I had a business partner actually call me up. And so and that's my time. That's supposed to be my time that I dedicate to my kids, right? I'm in a meeting. I should not be taking that call. And I wasn't, that was part of like the active listening to my wife, right? I was like hey, like you're not supposed to be in this call. And then I'm in there for like 5 or 10 more minutes. So I was just thinking of that. And then I was on a call last night and I told the guys, I was like, dude, I am sorry. I just cut you off. I verbalized it. I am really trying to work on that because I want somebody to finish their complete thought, their complete sentence. I want to absorb that information. And then I want to regurgitate my thoughts as far as how I respond to it. So I'm really trying to be an active listener, just sit and re-listen and reflect. And I think that's an important part of like reproducing who I am, right? As a leader, I want people to listen to me, but I want them to actively absorb like what I'm trying to give them as information. And then I'm also trying to like get as much information out of them. Sometimes, hey, my buddy Ryan, what's up, baby boy? So active listening is such a key part for me in really developing and cultivating relationships and that trust factor across the board. And so that's where that's just the huge vulnerability factor. But I want that to be reproduction into the way people might, one of my team members, obviously he's prospecting. He's on the dialer. I told him major part of that is active listening, hearing what, people are saying, what they need. The Miami sub, baby. Love that. So it's just part of that process is really going through that and being an active listener, being attentive to what people are saying. I know that's really been a huge point in my relationship and my marriage, which is obviously you all know is so completely important to me. It's my purpose. It's my why. I believe God has just created my wife for me. I rely on her actually quite a bit. And her feedback is important to me. So I want to actively listen to that. And I think that's going to play a major part of like who I am and my role as a dad too. Another piece is just being able to apologize when I'm in the wrong. I'm apologizing to a 3-year-old, right? I'm apologizing to a 2-year-old, maybe in the way I react. So that's part of like an active listening skill set is I want them to know that, hey, like, I'm sorry the way I reacted. And I want to be able to hear them out. I want them to be able to verbalize. I almost talk to them like they're a 15 or even a 17-year-old, but I want them to be able to, hey, just talk, listen to me. I'm here to listen to you. If you could tell me, like, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings right now? And I think asking questions is so important and something that I just took notes on, right? I plan for these sessions. One of the biggest parts, I don't try to hop on. I listen to a ton of podcasts so that I can provide content, to all the listeners out there that actually are coming in. And I have plenty of mentors that are feeding into my life. I just want to let you know too, that like I call a mentor somebody, maybe even a person that I've never met personally, right? They can be mentors. And that's something that Pat was even talking about in this digital age where like the CNBCs and the Foxes 10 years ago had access to this. We have access to this free, right? And I just dive into podcasts because I want to be putting in my mind as much information that I possibly can on leadership. I think leadership is almost hinged on everything across the board. And if you can lead well, you can reproduce well. And so that's one thing that I try to build in my mind over and over again is how I can be an active listener, how I can lead well, constantly be putting information in my mind so that I can provide value and content on platforms like this, right? To everyone that, as I build up more of a following, that I'm providing you really, really valuable content as far as what I'm feeding into my mind. So yeah, man, I don't know. You got anything to build onto that, Pat? I know we're gonna provide some good content today, and I
Well,
want to go.
yeah, I think that back to square one, it's just what you put into your head is just as important as anything else. I think we see these guys. I've been on a lot of interviews with people recently, uh, just talking about success in general. And
Yeah,
the people that I run into that are the most successful with their family and the most successful with their mindset and the
right.
most successful with their daily regimen and all these little things that we don't really talk about very often are the people that have the most success in business, that have the highest sales, that are the happiest, that have the best relationship with their wives, because they've got all the other stuff down, the working out and the schedule and the staying on task in all these different areas. And so what that does is that creates a nice, circle, a nice flow
Mhm.
for them to live in. And I think if you're not living in a flow and everything's chaotic, and I mean, there's going to be a touch of chaos anyway, regardless. Business is up in the air a lot. And especially right now with what we're dealing with
Mhm.
people being shut out and forced out of work, being told to stay home, being told to adhere to a different type of schedule, a different type of lifestyle. And we are relying more and more and more on these digital tools. It's imperative and it's essential to have a certain type of task list each day that you're getting into, that you're reproducing for you so that you can go out and put out the best possible product of yourself to the
Mhm.
world, because you are a product now. There's no doubt about it. Personal branding and
Mhm.
that stuff it's taking over. If you
Yeah.
watched the Super Bowl this year, I don't know, we talked about this maybe on another episode. If you watched the Super Bowl this year, it was almost not as much about the companies selling you anything as it was a person selling you something, like The Rock or Pitbull or this person or that person or the other person. We were talking more about people than we
Mhm.
were the Coca-Cola polar bears. So
Yeah.
if you're not focusing on getting your personal stuff together in your personal lane and in your
Mhm.
life outside of everything else, then I think that if there's chaos there, there's going to be chaos everywhere. So it goes
For
back into this.
sure.
If you can lead yourself well, then you can reproduce that well out wherever you're at with your team or with your family or with this or with that. Are there going to be bumps in the road? Absolutely. That's called life. But at the
Mhm.
same time, if you've got your, we're rated G for the kids here, but if you've got your SHIT together, then you're going
Mhm.
to be all good because it
Yeah, man.
starts with you.
Yeah.
And it
No.
goes from there. And I think people forget that. Oh, if I just had $1 million business, then I'd be happy or successful. Oh, well, if I just had a better voice or, then I could be the next John Mayer or whatever like that. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
well, if you put in the work and figure out a regimen and a schedule to get yourself to be the best that you can possibly be in those areas, then
Mhm.
those results can come. But just
Yeah.
thinking about those results and pointing at those results, that's not really necessarily going to get you that result. You got to lead yourself to those results by taking action. And action is where people kind of get hung up too, because people are
Yeah.
like, oh, well, it's so far away. I don't know if I want to start. I don't know if I can do that. And then they start talking themselves out of it. They start getting scared. They
Mhm.
start having, what's that term? I've heard this term before, analysis paralysis. You're analyzing so much that your actions are paralyzed and you're doing nothing instead. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that going on right now because people are a little bit afraid of potentially getting sick or whatever. Here's the truth. You could get sick no matter what day it is. It's just happens to be enhanced right now. So you've got to think, okay, well, I've got to take certain action anyway, because
Mhm.
there's always going to be some kind of fear in your life, whether it's the coronavirus or whether it's the fear of failure or whether it's I'm going to get on live and embarrass myself and not get all my cues right. Well, welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Most people, if not everyone in the world, is dealing with the same thing. So I think it's important to understand if you can lead yourself well, then you can lead others well.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think we forget that. We're worried about everybody else and all this external stuff instead of focusing on the inward thinking and focusing what's going on in here. We fix that first and we can put out greatness.
Yeah, no, I thank you so much for saying that, because I actually was listening to something last night that exactly is, and I was actually feeding it into a like a mentee of mine. She's awesome, and I just try to encourage her, and she's doing amazing things. But I just feed encouragement. I call them mentees because anyone who you can feed encouragement into, I feel like I can be a mentee to anybody. Like if you can feed encouragement to me and teach me, you can teach me anything. I love it. Just don't teach me anything bad. I just am open to anything that I can learn that can create positive momentum in somebody else's life. So the other day, last night, I had listened to a podcast the night before, but I'm just going to give a visual here. So like when you're when you get in an airplane, right? And you sit down, and then the stewardess comes out, and they start going through, like, obviously the trainings, the rules of, like, what you need to do in case of emergency happen, and when your oxygen mask pops down, and they tell you, if you got an old elderly person or a kid next to you, make sure you take care of yourself first. Put on your mask first, and then you can help them, right? And how true is that in life? How true is that? You got to take care of yourself, right? You got to give yourself oxygen before you can actually give oxygen to others. And I think that's what I try to do, right? I try to do even with this podcast is I'm trying to give myself oxygen. I'm trying to give myself, how I can lead well from other people. I'm trying to give myself that oxygen, right? Because I need that. And then I can actually reproduce that by giving it to somebody else. But I got to feed myself first. And a lot of people think like, oh, I'm just going to get out there, I'm going to do it, and take that action. But like, feed yourself. And action is so key. Like, action is that, but the action is feeding yourself. You can be selfless, but that's part of being selfless, right? Is feeding yourself that, and then really building onto that and reproducing, part of the reproduction of who you are. And then really putting that, that positivity. I know that, some people don't want to hear all positivity. You can't be all perpetually positive. You can find a silver lining in every single scenario. It does not matter the scenario you are in. You can find a silver lining. I've been through the hills and I've been through the valleys, but without a doubt, I can find, the one thing, I'm going through this study with Charles Stanley right now, is it's called peace. But it's one of the things that everything's controllable between your ears. Everything is controllable. It's up to you. You have the action to control your mindset. So you choose one way or another where you want to take your mind, but it's up to you to take that route. So you want to take the high road, you take the high road. If you want to take some other road, you can take some other road. But you definitely want to take control of that mindset, and that mindset is so important. And I thank you so much for bringing that up, because I forgot that analogy. But give yourself oxygen, man. Give yourself oxygen. You got to work on yourself first. So give yourself oxygen, and then you can do that. Put out that reproduction and give back to others and really take that action. So, and what does that look like? That's going to be in every different scenario, right? My action was a lot different than what somebody else's action is going to be. I'm just, put it in relevant terms. Yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, right? And so mine's, action in my business, but knowing my purpose and my why. Every day, what I think Patrick Lencioni, he's the one who actually brought this up to me. But and Pat, I think you're familiar with him. I don't know if you know him, but he said that all you are is the chief reminding officer. When you go into meetings, you're just reminding people of the vision, right? Something that, hey, this is something bigger than yourself. I remind myself and my team every morning we have a meeting, right? And we have a positive meeting. Like, we have to start the day off with a positive mindset. So we might take 15 minutes, we might take 30 minutes, but we go in and we say something positive. Hey, what positive? And sometimes I really got to pull it out of people. But what is the silver lining in the scenario? Like, there's opportunity to see that. But I always start out between 15 and 30 minutes. We go round table of like, where is the positive? Where do we see it? And it can be personal, which I love the personal, because then you get to know them on a more personal, more intimate level, your team members. But like it could be on a professional level too, and that's when they're just taking ownership in their job. Like, hey, this happened, I loved it. Like, this is, we got 95 per collections in rent this month. Like it was good. We just had really good momentum. We cleared up all of our bad debt, like stuff like that. That's just, you're gaining momentum on a professional level. But I love getting to know my team members on a personal level. And that's why we start out that positivity, man. I'm grateful to be alive today. And there's a number of things that go around. My executive assistant, she loves painting, and she always brings that up. She loves her grandkid. That's a positive she had, like almost a life. And like a lot of times what she brings up in our meetings. So, just those are the things, just asking questions, getting that momentum, that ball rolling. And that's part of the reproduction, but it allows people to start thinking, like, what's my why? What's my purpose? Where am I going to be at in 5 years? Where am I going to be at in 10 years? Thinking of something like truly bigger than you are, instead of going through the mundaneness of life, right? I used to be an accountant, and then in the financial setting, doing a financial analysis and earned value management for the Department of State and the Department of Defense. Like, that is like a background that I had. And, when I had that lifestyle, I really didn't have like a true vision of where I was going. And then when I became an entrepreneur, roughly around like 4 or 5 years ago, things became bigger. It's like clockwork. And I started learning and wanted to learn more and more. And I love learning about, everything that I can absorb from people in general. And now I feel like I have to demonstrate, I have to give oxygen to other people, but I still give oxygen to myself. Like that, I work on myself and my reflection and my journaling every day in order to reproduce that. Right. And my why starts at home though. How am I going to reproduce? Like, how are my children going to view me? I was actually talking to one of my great buddies, and he was just going through a spot in his life where he just needed some encouragement. And I was like, bro, I got you. Like, I'm here for you. And this is kind of where I see things are going from here. And I just fed into him. And I asked him, I was like, dude, I want you to look at this. And I want you to look at this because he's an entrepreneur too. And I said, you're working in your business and growing. And I know you're going through a pivotal time because you're in growth phase. Like, he's growing in his company, and he's super excited about it, but it's burdened him down. He's just becoming like, he found it very difficult. Everything became super foggy. And he's like, dude, like, there's just this, there's a block, there's a restraint. And I said, man, look at this. And I'm like, have you fulfilled your why? Like, have you written down your why? My wife and I, we wrote down for our family, and I got this book from the book called Traction. But my purpose, it's a business book, but the one thing I wanted to do was to create a family traction, right? So I created a vision statement, a mission statement. I think actually one of our early episodes I went through this, but we have our family core values. And I was like, do you know that? I asked him that. I was like, is that written down? Do you know that? And he said no. He's like, I don't. Like, I know the vision in my head, but it's not written down. And I was like, you need to sit down with your wife and build out your mission, your vision, and your core values, because I know that's your why. Because I just know that about him. I know his heart and his passion. He's very instrumental in his church and mentoring other people. And I just told him, I said, you got to establish that, man, because that is going to give you so much clarity when you go through your abiding in the mornings, when you journal in the mornings, when you go through these things. Like, that gives you so much clarity. And so he's like, yeah, man, I get it. Like, I get it. Like, that's bogged down. And I was like, when you get to the end of your life, do you want your kids to see you as, wow, he built this badass company, and we have millions of dollars, and we get to do whatever we want now. And I didn't know him all that well because he worked all the time, but he's leaving us a legacy of wealth, and we get to experience that. Or do you want, he worked his ass off, and he did, but we were number ones in his life, and he's leaving us a couple $1 million. He's leaving us a lot of money too. He built a legacy off of that, but he worked his ass off, but we knew he was his number one, and that we knew him very well. And he's on his deathbed, and we're like, Dad, I loved you. You couldn't give any more. You couldn't have done any more for us. You gave us so much. You reproduced so well. And he's like, man, he's like sitting there thinking about it. And I was like, that's how I want my life to be. I want to maximize my life, but I want to have my why so well defined that my kids know, man, he worked hard as a dad. He worked hard. He worked even harder as a husband, and he worked hard as a dad, and then he worked on his business, and he worked hard on his business. And so I want them to see the work ethic in me because I work hard. But I also want to realize like my why is so well defined. My purpose is so well defined that like my vision is much greater than I am. And when I get to my deathbed, I know that I want my kids to look at me and, Dad, man, you worked your ass off for us. Like you worked your ass off at home and for mom. Like you worked so hard, and now you're seeing the fruits of your labor. You're seeing the fruits. An author, I was talking with an author, is actually a good friend of mine, Ashley Snavely. I hope you watch this, Ashley. Shout out to you. But Bruce Snavely is an author, phenomenal guy. And I just had this conversation with him, and I was like, Bruce, man, you see the fruits of your labor. Your children are amazing people. And that's just you. You invested into your kids, and now they just want to be around you, right? And there's no friction in the household. I'm sure they got like the good kid banter, but they just love each other. They're a family that just loves each other, that's wholly united, and they're an awesome family. And I just think that is reproduction at its finest. This guy's at, he's mid 60 years old, and he's just a phenomenal man, even a better husband. And then he's reproduced well, right? And he can see that. He's like, man, I did. That's awesome. And I'm in the process of reading one of his books right now, and it's just so important to me, this topic of reproduction and reproducing who you are, because that is just so important to clearly define your why very early on, and then you get to reproduce who you are. And reproducing hard just isn't explained in your personal life, but like I'm trying to reproduce who I am even in my business life, right? For the people that are on my team, like how am I reproducing in that capacity as well? Am I getting them to think much bigger than themselves, right? And so that's just anything else to add there, Pat? I'm going to end with a couple questions that I learned from John Maxwell, but if you want to add anything.
No, man, I dig it. I think it's important, be present at home. I mean, we relocated so that we could have a place where I could run and build the business digitally, and be around the kids. And that's why we moved where we moved. We left the West Coast, left the beach, and the jobs that I used to work 2 years ago don't exist anymore because of what's going on right now with this pandemic. So while I feel for people that are out of work, obviously that's not a good thing. I made a conscious decision a few years ago to move in a different direction. I consider it the right direction. You choose where your mind goes. My mind was going over here, and I chose to send it that way. And so now I'm, building a client list and building brands for people and helping people get a positive message out into the world. And I changed environments, and the environment I'm in now is virtual and digital. And so that's why what I'm doing is thriving right now through this time. And I think it's important to remember that the decisions that you make right now are going to dictate who you are 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 15 months, 2 years from now. In 13, 14 days or so, I will be 600 days sober. I haven't drank alcohol in almost 2 years, coming up on 2 years. That's a decision that I made because, in my opinion, I'm one of those people that either I'm going to drink the whole entire bottle or I'm not going to do it at all. I chose to not do it at all anymore. That's a decision that I had to make.
How has that impacted your family?
I think it's impacted us well. I think that, I got stuff to do. I fill my schedule with stuff that I need to do. And when I feel like, I want to do something that doesn't align with where I'm going, I take a different task. I remember that, that's not going to get me to where I want to go. That the results that I was getting when I was doing certain types of things wasn't what I wanted. And it's different for everybody. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean that everybody needs to stop drinking tomorrow. That's not what I'm saying. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean alcohol's bad. It's the way my body reacts to it
Hmm.
that is bad. And so, I think it's important to assess those things. None of us are perfect. Progress over perfection. You need to be making progress. And that was the progress that I needed to make in that area at that time. So I just left it behind. I didn't do it for a long time till I was 25 or 26, maybe even later than that. Like I didn't go out when I was 21 like everyone else did and,
Yeah.
drink some beers in college. I didn't do that.
Mhm.
I didn't start until later. And like everything, I overdid it. So it's all good. So, and I'm choosing to overdo things that affect me in a positive way because I
Yeah.
know now after analyzing that's how I am. I'm one of those 10x types of people that like, I'm going to go all the way on it. So that's fine. Just don't go all the way on that. Go all the way on something else. Go all the way on the family. Go all the way on the digital marketing. Go all the way on singing positive stuff, putting out records or whatever it is that you want to do.
Mhm.
Make sure that it's aligning with where you want to be in the future. That would be what I would say. This whole choose where your mind goes things is a great lesson for anybody because it is a choice. Sometimes I find my mind getting off track. I get frustrated or upset or something like that. And like you said, I choose to find the happiness in that. It recenters me.
Absolutely.
So that stuff is important because it's easy to get drained. It's easy to get burned out. And it's easy to, kind of forget why you started doing what you do. And you got to recalibrate and recenter yourself sometimes. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that I think it's most defined in one word, what you did and what I did even 5 years ago, and that's called a pivot, right? It's a simple pivot. Like it literally, you just make a choice. You either make a choice, and then there's going to be failures along the way, but you got to redefine that definition of failure, right? So if I failed, I owned up to it, and then how do I pivot right from it? So I pivot, and you pivot. You pivot every day. You either make small pivots or you make large pivots, right? That was a big pivot, right? He's 600 days sober. I pivoted into kind of sitting down and explaining my why, right? Am I going to get a divorce or am I going to, just lock into my marriage, lock into my wife and make something really, really awesome out of it, right? Create a culture within my house. And that's what I decided to do. One thing I want to end on, I learned from John Maxwell. And I don't take all the questions down, but like when you sit down with John Maxwell, one of the most encouraging things that I heard when I was listening to one of his podcasts is that if you sit down and actually are at lunch with him, he has questions for you, right? You would think that like sitting down with John Maxwell, I would want to ask him so many questions, like life experiences, do all these things. But he'll sit down. He wants to know you, He's like, I don't want to like, I can explain my story all day. Like, hey, no, I want to ask you some questions. So I want to end off on this. I think there is super cool, but he'll start off, he'll sit down, you're just having a casual lunch. And he's like, what are the great lessons you've learned? And I'm like, dang, like that causes you to think, right? What are the great lessons I've learned? Like what? So like, I'm like, man, like I guess there's a lot of lessons I've learned, business, relationships. We're talking about a few right now. How do you make a pivot? What does that look like? Locking into people that are ahead of you, always locking into people that are ahead of you, whether it's in business or your marriage, locking in and really understanding those things. Really, Carnegie says it, as I get older, I listen less to what people say and watch what people do. So that's a huge indicator of your success, right? I watch what people do. So that's huge. Second question, right? How has failure shaped your life? How has failure shaped your life? If you're following somebody that's never failed, you're not going to do any favors for yourself. Like everyone's failed and we learn through failure. So redefine your definition of failure. I love failing every day. I love doing things that are uncomfortable, right? This was never comfortable to hop on a live video with Pat there. This was never comfortable for me to talk and kind of put my thoughts and feelings out in the world. But, hey, I got to do it. I got to constantly put myself in uncomfortable situations. So how has failure shaped your life? Number 3, what are your strengths? Keep people in their strength zone. Everyone has strengths. Everyone has passions. God's made us in a very, very unique way. So how do you keep people in their strength zone? And identifying those strength zone in business, it's putting people in the right seats and really knowing if it's the wrong seat, right, early on, and either repositioning or just saying, hey, it's not a good fit. So you definitely need to make sure people are in their strength zone, and then obviously empower them when they are in their strength zone. So what are your strengths? Write those down. What is your passion? Number 4, knowing your passion is so big, right? One of my passions is relationships. I put on my page the other day, commitment is sexy. I've never been happier because I'm committed now, right? I'm committed. I don't let my eyes wander. I'm committed to my wife. I love my wife. I'm so passionate about my wife. Commitment is sexy, man. Guys, remember that when we're having a rising divorce rate, get through those hurdles. You're going to go through some really, really bad times. You're either going to have multiple relationships with different people, or you're going to have multiple relationships with the same person. I choose to have multiple relationships with the same person. My wife is not the same. She doesn't think the same. She doesn't act the same, and she doesn't look the same she was when she was 18. She's 34 years old now. I love her how she's at 34 years old, and I want to grow with her, and I want to maintain that perspective that she's not going to be the same person at 34 as she is 40 and 6 years and 10 years and whatever. She's not going to be that same person. I'm going to love her differently. So you can either love her where she's at, or you can love somebody else where they're like, no one's ever going to stay the same. You're going to cycle through, you're going to be different people, but you got to lock in, and you got to make that conscious choice to lock in. So commitment is sexy. What is your passion though? What is your passion? Identify your passion in life. It's so important to identify that passion. Mine, I have it outside of my purpose and my why is obviously real estate. I love real estate. I love talking real estate. I love raising capital. I love building relationships with people. I love just cultivating. It's great. It's a passion of mine. What's your passion? And don't make your passion video games. Don't make your passion something that isn't going to really empower the lives of others. Don't make it that, right? Your passion might be video games. And if it is, maybe utilize it for the purpose, how it is going to empower. But don't just make it like a video game, or don't make it like working out for 3 hours by yourself. That's never going to be. Make sure you're in tune. So those are some of the things that I've learned because I've been in that stage, right? Working out for 3 hours, just getting as big as possible, benching 375 pounds. Is that going to enhance my lifestyle? Probably not. Locking into my wife, man, is that good? Yeah, that's awesome. So know what is your passion. Find a good passion that's going to impact positively the lives of others. Number 5, asking a person. I love this. John Maxwell asks, who do you know that I should know? Now, I thought at first, I'm like, that's kind of weird, right? Am I just talking past this guy? Like, I should know you. No, I should know you. But I always go into a conversation that is exactly be a connector, is how you can add value to other people, right? I always look is there somebody that I should know, that you should know, or you should know somebody that I should know? I always try to find a connection point where I can blend each other. I was talking to one of my buddies, hadn't talked to him actually in about a year, and we hopped on a phone call, and I was like, hey man, what are you doing? How's business going? He's an entrepreneur as well. He does digital marketing. I was like, how are you? And so his company just got taken over from a private equity capital group. And I'm like, dude, congratulations. That's awesome. And I was like, well, what do you do? I was asking questions. I was prodding. And then I was able to I was like, dude, I have another buddy that does actually digital marketing as well. And he's hyper focused on doctors and ENTs. And I think there's some value there that I could connect you. Do you care if I connect you to? Of course, man. So be a connector, always establish, but asking that question, who do you know maybe that I should know? Number 6, what have you read that I should read? I love reading. Podcasts are my main source of what I call reading. I learn from people. It's a quick snapshot of an hour that I can build in. But I love reading too. I'm going through the E-Myth in another book right now. I don't love multiple books at one time. I like kind of staying focused on one book, but right now it's a spiritual book and more of a business related book. So do that. Number 7, what have you done that I should do? I like that question. What have you done that I should do? So there's different experience of life that could be both like on a personal level or professional level, but it's usually what have you done? How have you stretched yourself? How have you maximized yourself? And how have you really maxed out? You know, the Ed Milet model, max out. So what have you done that I should do? So make sure you're growing and make sure you're obviously, you know, getting acclimated to your environment, but in that growth phase, and then asking people, hey, is there something you did that I can do to really create more growth in my life? Number 8, is there any way that I can add value to you? I was in a mastermind the other day. A guy came in, he added so much value to us. And I just had to ask him, I was like, is there any way I could add value to you today? He came back with, dude, I like appreciate the vulnerability and that you've already added value to me by some of the things that you had said. So I plan on going Google and giving a review. If they don't say like, oh, there's no way I can't that I can add value, you can always leave a Google review. I think that Google reviews are huge. They go a long ways. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe. Give me some feedback. I love that. Sharing it. That's adding value to me, right? I'm trying to get the word out. But yeah, is there any way I can add value to you? Ask that question. I love adding value to people. If there's any way I can add value, please. Will you speak honestly into my life? How crazy is that? Will you speak honestly into my life? You're showing your vulnerability. Vulnerability is your biggest strength. I think that's so huge. So like just being vulnerable with yourself. Hey, I want to learn. I want some feedback. Please give me feedback. I've asked so many people in this podcast, right? Tell me, like I'm putting out content, but tell me how I can get better. And I was talking to somebody the other day. They're like, you know what you could do? You could slow down. And I talk fast. I get excited. I'm passionate about it. And I'm like, dude, that's some great feedback. So I definitely love that. I love the feedback on how I can get better, and I can put that, those anything that I can grab on to really grow and get better in my life. And so I'm always looking to get better here. So please give me feedback. If you can give me feedback, I'm vulnerable to that. And then the last thing is, can I express gratitude to you? I love gratitude. I love sending gratitude emails. I try to do that. I try to send gratitude text on a daily basis. Pat's gotten a few of those. I promise you that. I'm extremely grateful for him. And people across the board in my life that have made an impact. I want to make sure that they know that I'm very grateful. And that's it, man. Those are the 10 questions that I think can be a profound impact. You don't got to layer them up in every conversation. I think they can happen organically too. But those are some really good questions to ask some people to make sure that you're growing. So that's it from Reap the Harvest. Check us out. Subscribe to us. Please share. And you guys have an awesome Friday. Feliz Viernes. We out. Peace.
Thanks, guys and gals. Share the stream. Subscribe on podcast sites. We got a lot of updates coming to all the channels, and we hope to see y'all soon.